Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I thought we could test out some new paper. I've never tried this paper before, and it's because I recently received this order of notebooks from Sterling Ink, and they switched to a new type of paper. It's called Koji paper. Previously they were using TRP, Tomoe River paper, but due to the inconsistencies in the batches, they decided to pivot. And they said that Koji paper is very similar, slightly more creamy in color, but still thin, and it should show off fountain pens nicely. So I got some pocket sizes, some A6s, and then an A5. They're having another release where they are releasing different sizes. I don't think they had A5 Slim in their initial release. They didn't have their full lineup. But anyway, these are all grid. So pocket, A6, A5. I really wanted the A5 Slim to go into my Louise Carmen covers, but I'll have to wait on those. I did pick this A5 up though, thinking that I might cut it. I didn't want to get too many because I'm not familiar with the paper, but I was waiting so long for the restock that I don't know, I kind of did stock up. Anyway, as far as the inconsistencies with the TRP this year, I experienced it firsthand. So here is the B6 Common Planner that I purchased for 2026. And unfortunately, there was some bleed through with some of the broader pens and then some of the Zig Clean color dots. And then when I did try to use this, the bleed through was just not it. So you can see here the bleed through that was happening. And I had to cover it up with different pieces of paper and ephemera, just from writing with my Leonardo Belladonnate with a fine nib. Let's compare that to a different Sterling Ink book. This is a pocket-sized 500-page book. This paper did amazingly well. There was absolutely no bleed through with anything. So that's the thing. You just never know what paper you're going to get, and sometimes people have even experienced paper issues within the same book. So with that being said, let's take a look at the new Koji paper, and we'll compare it to Tomoe River paper, Sterling Ink, and also we have Hobonichi, and I also have a Midori Hibino, just so we can kind of take a look at the color. First up, let's do the Koji paper on the bottom with the Tomoe River paper from Sterling Ink on the top. You can see that the TRP is whiter. TRP is obviously very smooth and thin. This is also smooth and thin. It doesn't feel as kind of glossy. It feels like there's a little bit more tooth to it, kind of like Midori. So then comparing the Koji paper to Hobonichi's Tomoe River paper, Hobonichi on the top, Koji on the bottom. It is a little bit more yellow or creamy colored, very smooth and glossy and thin. Thin, not quite as glossy, just a little bit of, I don't know how to describe it, something. You can just feel the paper fiber a little bit more. The Koji Sterling Ink has, I think they're like light bluish gray grids. Hobonichi's book, this is their plain graph notebook, has more of like a tan. And then last up, let's take a look at Midori. This is the Midori Hibino, and we'll put this on the top compared to the Koji paper from Sterling Ink. I think the Midori, I'm not sure if it's coming through on video, but in person, the Midori is more yellow than the Koji paper. The Midori has obviously a smaller grid and it looks to be brown, while the Sterling Ink is kind of grayish blue. Let's put the Sterling Ink Tomoe River paper at the bottom. So at the top we have Midori, then we have Sterling Ink Koji, then we have Sterling Ink Tomoe River paper. So you can see that the TRP is whiter. The Midori is definitely more cream colored than any of the other books. All right, so let's get to the exciting part and let's do some paper testing of this Koji paper. I have a number of fountain pens here to try and some other utensils, and we're just going to see how it feels, and we'll compare it to writing on the Tomoe River paper. All right, so here we go. Let me grab one of my mini clampies and open this to a clean page. We've got Koji paper on the right, Tomoe River paper on the left. Let's move in a little bit. The pen that I use the most in my planner, my Pilot Decimo. I'm using this Superior Labor pen and wallet case. now after I received feedback on my video about a stationery that I don't use. Everybody said not to be afraid about the leather scratching the pens. So you can see I have it filled up here. I like it. I like how squeaky it is. Okay, we have blotting paper. We're going to start with the Koji paper and we'll do a title. I'm just going to go right in with this Pilot Parallel and we're going to say paper test. That should give us a good idea about any bleed through and how inks look on the paper and whether it shows off ink properties. And let's do the same with the Sterling Ink TRP. This is going to be hard because it's such a fat book. I'm actually going to split it down the middle and sacrifice a page in the middle of the book for this paper test. I can tell right away that the TRP is smoother to write on. It doesn't have quite as much resistance to the nib. This is the Pilot Decimo Extra Fine. All right, let's listen to the feedback. And then let's do that on the Koji paper and we'll listen to the feedback. You can just hear it. So that is the Pilot Decimo. Let's try a broader nib. This is the Pilot Vanishing Point. And we'll do this on the Koji paper. You can hear it squeaking a little bit. It's a broad nib. Let's try the TRP. So it squeaked on that one too, but still obviously smoother. Let's just take a look at the ink drying on the page. It seems to be drying on the Koji paper faster than the TRP. With the vanishing point, look at the bottom of the letters. We just did that one. And then look at the TRP. There is more ink that has to dry. And then if we look at the Pilot Parallel paper test, the TRP, you can see some dark green, some yellow, some grass green. On the Koji paper, you can see that, but it's not quite as strong. I don't know if it's the color, but that's kind of interesting. And then let's see, the vanishing point, I think you can see a little bit more shading on the TRP versus the Koji paper. Let's take a look at the ink. Basically almost dry on the Koji paper, except for like the little points. And on the TRP, still drying. I think that since it's holding the ink longer, that is going to create more variation in the ink and possibly show the ink off more. Let's check out the bleed through or ghosting really quickly. Here is the Koji paper. The only thing bleeding through is the Pilot Vanishing Point with the broad nib. This has a Wearingeul ink in it that has been bleeding through and feathering on most papers, so I'm not really bothered about that. And then if we look at the TRP, basically the same result, maybe a little bit less than the Koji. All right, let's try some more pens and inks. I have here a vintage Waterman Flex pen, and it has Birmingham Pen Company Snapdragon, which is one of my favorite pink inks. It's a delicate ink, so it's safe for vintage pens. I can definitely feel the tooth of this paper. Let's try the TRP. I'm just noticing that if you look at the Pilot Vanishing Point on the Koji paper, it's feathering right here. If you look at the TRP, it's feathering on that. Not quite as much though, I would say. And again, with the Waterman, you can see already that the TRP has more colors coming out in the ink. There's some purple, there's some pink, some darker purple, versus the Koji, which is pretty much all purple except for right here. So again, not really showing off the ink quite as nicely as the TRP. Let's see what else we have in here. We have a Sailor Pro Gear, and we've got a Pro Gear here. This has a chromo shading ink in it. All right, we've got some pens. Snow Angel. I really like it. It goes down sort of orange and then dries to like a more dusty pink color. And it shades really prettily. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the TRP is just so much smoother. All right, we've got TRP on the top, Koji on the bottom, Pilot Parallel, so much more dynamic on the TRP versus the Koji. And I think if you quickly glance at these inks, you would say that they just look a little bit better on the TRP. There's more shading. If you look at the Kitty ink pot in the Mahjong, it's shading. There's darker orange, lighter oranges. And then if you look at the Koji, I mean, I guess there is a little bit. It just looks prettier on the TRP. TWSBI Mini with Tono limbs is just sort of a lilac-y color compared to the TRP where it looks almost pinkish. And then Sailor Pro Gear that has Snow Angel, pretty. And then this one's just, it feels like a little bit darker or muddier to me, but you know, I would say fairly close. And they probably look exactly the same on the video. Let's take a look at the back. Here's the Koji. No bleed through except for the Pilot Vanishing Point. And with the TRP, no bleed through except with the Pilot Vanishing Point. And I guess when it comes to ghosting, it looks like the Koji has a little bit more ghosting. If you look at the Waterman, right below the Pilot Vanishing Point. All right, let's just do a few more because I love to write on paper. So we're going back to the TRP, and I have this Magna Carta Flex. This is the MST. And this has a Pilot Iroshizuku ink in it, which is Tsutsuji. And there's a huge amount coming out because I advanced the feed. So that will be a good test for this paper. Let's try the Magna Carta on the Koji paper. It's almost like the nib is kind of getting stuck. All right, we'll let that dry. Whoops, oh no. Let's do this Atelier Lusso. And let's do it on the TRP. Yeah, for me, it's going to be the TRP for sure. It's just so much smoother and nicer to write on. Okay, then what is this? This is a Sailor Pro Gear. I'm not sure what's in this. And since the Magna Carta is still drying, let's do some tests with some highlighters. So we have a Tombow, single, double. We have the Zig Clean Color Dots, a Flex, and let's do a brush pen. The pen, TWSBI Broad, TWSBI Broad. This has some shimmer in it. All right, so let's take a look at the inks. TRP on the left, Koji on the right. Look at the Magna Carta that has Pilot Iroshizuku Tsutsuji. You can just see more outlining going on versus the ink on the Koji. Atelier Lusso, this has Pilot Iroshizuku Shungyo in it. It's a sheening ink, kind of purple to green, so you can see the sheen there, which is good. Also on the TRP, Platinum and Pro Gear, both pink inks. There's just a little bit more shading going on. And then TWSBI Eco, you can see the shimmer and you can see the shimmer. Let's see how it did on the back. So we have the TRP, no bleed through except for the wearing old ink with the Pilot Vanishing Point. And let's check out the Koji. Very little bleed through, just like the TRP, just the wearing old. but I think that there is a little bit more ghosting when you compare it side by side with the TRP, which is interesting because it's sort of a darker, more yellow paper. Am I disappointed? No, I'm not. I'm glad that I got the notebooks that I did, but I think this confirms for me that I am really a TRP fan, and there's nothing like it. I mean, I'm looking at this Pilot Parallel ink again. When you're really into pens and inks and paper, it makes a big difference. Also grittier to write on. I think I'm going to do a couple of pens on the Midori paper to get a feel for that. I won't do a full paper test, but we'll just write on it and see how it feels. I remember that it was toothier and my fountain pens didn't really work the same as they had on TRP. So I'm kind of curious to see how this paper compares to the Koji. So let's just pick a random page and go for it. We'll start with the Pilot Decimo. That's interesting. I feel like the Midori paper isn't as toothy as the Koji paper. No, it's not. It's smoother. Interesting. Let's see. Let's do a flex. Let's do the Magna Carta. Not as smooth as the TRP. Kind of catching the nib a little bit. Vintage Flex. This must still have some of the Waterman's inspired blue in it because it is turning up purple. Okay, let's do the TWSBI with Tono and Limbs. That's why I prefer white paper, because you can just see the colors more. They kind of jump out of the page more. But it's not bad. I like it more than I remember. Here is the Mahjong with the Kitty ink pot. Also a light ink. And let's do the Pro Gear Medium with Snow Angel from Colorverse. This feels nice. Let's see, TWSBI Eco Broad with the Shimmer ink, which I believe is Colorverse Witch by Starlight from Goulet. With a fine nib, you can definitely feel the grit of the paper more. And is there anything else we want to do? I guess we'll do some of the Tombos, the Zig Clean Color Dots, the brush pen, the Le Pen, and now let's compare these. Wow, look at the Pilot Parallel. Here's the TRP. It looks even better than the TRP. I can see why people like it, actually. And just a tiny bit of bleed through with the Vanishing Point Broad with the Wear Angle ink. Now I'm just going to not be nervous to use these. I'm just going to go through them. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.